Shabbat Shalom. It's Rabbi Sam here with the GGS Dvar Torah for Shabbat Vayera. And of course I know that now we've entered lockdown again, this will be a hard time for many who are unable to be with close friends and family, as well as those who are worried about their own health and the health of their loved ones. And please do reach out to Hadassah, to myself, if you need support in any extra way, and we'll try as a community and as individuals to help you. In this week's parasha, we have amazing examples of courage, of faith and of conviction. Of course, Avraham argues with Hashem over the fate of Sodom. And then, of course, the climax is the profound and complex challenge of the Akedah. However, I'd like to pick up on a less obvious example of faith in this week's parasha, but hopefully one that is more relatable for us in our daily challenges. After Sodom and Amorah are destroyed, Avraham wakes up, returns to the spot where he's argued and appealed with Hashem for their lives, and he gazed out at the valley that was once this bustling city, this metropolis, and he sees the thick smoke rising from the land. How does Avraham feel in that moment? On that the Torah is silent. But according to Chazal, Avraham davened. And in fact, it's at that moment that Tefillah Shachrit, the morning prayer, is established. The Gemara in the Breita Masechet Brachot says, Tanya Kvate to Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. It was taught in a Breita according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. Avraham tiken Tefillat Shachrit. Avraham established the morning prayer, the prayer of Shachrit. Shneimar, as it says, V'yashkem Avraham baboker. Avraham woke up in the morning. El hamakom asher amad sham. And he went to the place where he'd stood before the Lord. And that is this in this week's parasha. After the destruction of Sodom, Avraham goes back and stands in that same place. And the Breita says, Ein amidah ela tefillah. There's no such thing as standing other than a description of tefillah. The Breita then goes on to link Yitzchak to Mincha and Yaakov to Mariv. But this Breita is a little bit difficult because the verses, of course, don't mention tefillah in any explicit way. Why do we rely on such vague, inconclusive references? Surely we just saw early in the parasha Avraham davening, arguing with Hashem. Surely that tefillah is a much more pertinent and explicit example of Avraham davening. How come that isn't the archetype of tefillah as opposed to this opaque reference of amidah, of standing? In order to understand this Breita, we must distinguish between two types of prayer. One form of prayer is the daily prayer. And according to Rambam, that is a biblical obligation, a Torah requirement, derived from the verse that we say every single day in the Shema, V'haya im shemot tishmor mitzvotai, asher anochi metzaveh etchem hayom, lihava et Adonai Elohechem la'avdo, b'chol levavchem u'b'chol nafshechem. If you obey the commandments that I command you this day, loving the Lord with your God, and serving him with all your heart and all your soul. And that serving Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, every single day, that is tefillah according to the Rambam. The second form of prayer is derived from the verse in Bamidbar. And shall you come to warn your land against an oppressor who attacks you, and you shall sound the trumpets, and shall be remembered before Hashem your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies. From here the Rambam, in Hilchot Tan, learns that there's an independent obligation to cry out to Hashem, to daven, when calamity strikes, God forbid, when we're in special need, when we need saving, when we need to daven for someone's health. And so when our sages say that the forefathers established a daily prayer service, they were clearly referring to prayer as an act of worship, prayer as that daily connection to Hashem. And that, of course, then excludes those tefillah that are primarily needs-based. That tefillah that Avraham offers up to save Sodom, that's a needs-based tefillah. And that can't be considered a prototype of daily prayer. So therefore we're left with these subtle references. For example, Amad, Avraham stood in prayer. There's another Breita of Gemara in Masechet Brachot that I think sheds an even deeper light on this as we can really learn from. Amar Rabbi Chelbo says, Amar Rav Huna, Kol hakoveh makom l'tfilato Elohei Avraham be'ezro. Rav Chelbo said to the name of Rav Huna, one who sets a fixed place for his prayer, the God of Avraham will assist him. Ukshemet, and when he dies, Omrim lo, they'll eulogize him and say, Ey Anav, Ey Chasid, mitalmidev shel Avraham Avinu. Wow, where's that humble one? Where is that pious one? One of the disciples of our father Avraham. And this Gemara sings praises, says that the person who sets a fixed place for their prayer is like a Talmud of Avraham. What's so special about having a fixed place for your prayer? And I think this brings it back to our initial question. Avraham was told of the impending destruction of Sodom and Amorah. He was aware of how corrupt they were. He was aware of their moral bankruptcy, yet at the same time he davens for them. He was distraught at the prospect that they'd be destroyed, and he appealed to Hashem to have them spared. He cried out and ate ratzon in a specific requirement. He debated and he bargained. He poured his soul out. And the next morning, Avram arose early, eager to see whether his pleas has been successful, whether the city had been saved. And he returned to the spot where he'd argued with Hashem. And he gazed towards Sodom, and he was greeted by this horrific sight of death and destruction. How does Abraham react? Was he angry? Does he scream at God? Does he charge him with injustice? Or does he get dejected and feel that his unanswered prayers were pointless? According to our rabbis, Abraham chooses a third approach. He prayed. And in his humility, he recognized that although Hashem isn't bound to answer our prayers, he nonetheless listens. And perhaps assigning a set place of prayer doesn't just refer to a fixed geographic location. It's meant to express religious and spiritual consistency. Every day we return to that fixed place within ourselves, our set place of prayer. Whether we've won that day, whether we've lost that day, whether our prayers have been answered, whether things that we yearned for have come to fruition or not, we return to that place within us, that fixed place of prayer, 3 times a day. And with humility, we accept the divine will. And this isn't a grand gesture of sacrifice like the Akedah. It's not something to write an epic about. It's simple consistency. We've all had a year like no other. And now that shuls are closed again, we're cut off from each other in a way we never would have imagined as possible. More people are suffering in different ways. And we have to reach out with love and help wherever possible. And at the same time, we need to be like Avraham Avinu and maintain a consistency and daven. Even when we can't see directly how those tefillot are being answered, when there's such challenges going on in the world. Please God, as we go through those next few months, we can approach these challenges with conviction, with faith and with courage. We can daven for each other, daven for healing in the world, and daven for ourselves. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.